I think this is one question that actually comes up. The fiber in the food is important. And we know that as Americans, on average, we don't get enough fiber. So how does that fiber kind of, we all know that fiber is good for us and it helps stabilize blood sugar. What does fiber do in terms of the score, per se?
There are a number of factors that contribute to the score, and it wasn't my choice of the factors. That came out of that statistical modeling program that we used to generate the algorithm which provides the score, and that was all based on the independent input from all of those, the dietitians that we recruited for this. But fiber in particular is the factor that will push a score down.
Okay.
So the more fiber that's in a food, typically, the score will be lower. On the other hand, the more sugar that's in a food, the score will be higher.
Right. So you were talking about like the simple carbohydrates versus, I guess, the more complex carbohydrates.
Correct.
That are higher in fiber. So something like, like, could you give us an example of a food like,
Sure. So if you think about simple white breads, those will typically score higher because they have, in general, they have less dietary fiber. If you think of the sort of pastries that people often eat for breakfast on the go, simple pastries, cooked pastries, those are going to have a lot of sugar in them just because of the way they're made, and they're delicious and all of that. A lot of sugar, a lot of easily digested carbohydrates, and very little fiber. Those too would have a higher score. On the other hand, if you were eating a whole wheat toasted bread or some other higher fiber product like that, or there's a number of breakfast cereals that are really high in dietary fiber that are whole wheat or whole oat cereals, based cereals, those are going to score lower because they have less sugar perhaps, but more importantly because they have high dietary fiber content. And as you said, that modulates the rate at which the carbohydrates are broken down, digested, and then absorbed into the blood.
Yeah, because as you're saying it, I'm thinking, I can see what it would look like in terms of, somebody's blood sugar. So if somebody ate some, like you were saying, like white bread, you would see a quick rise and a quick fall, unfortunately, of their blood sugars. Whereas something that's higher in fiber, you would see this very mild rise, and it would stabilize their blood sugars and obviously with other things that they're eating.
Exactly.
And I like that. What else impacts this score besides fiber?
So I'll give you the breakdown. There are a number of, when we did the modeling, the computer modeling of this, we allowed the statistical program to look at all kinds of different nutrition factors, summed factors, log factors, any number of different combinations, and it came out to a relatively simple equation. Total fat in a food raises the score. The total saturated fat plus trans fat as a single term raises the score. So those are being counted twice. They're being counted by themselves, and they're being counted within the total fat. Total carbohydrates raises the score. Total sugar, that's added sugar and intrinsic sugar, raises the score. So those are being counted twice, by themselves and in the total carbohydrate number. Total dietary fiber, both soluble and insoluble, lowers the score. All of those are measured in grams, and there's a weighting factor in front of each one of those terms. And then the last one is sodium, measured in milligrams. Sodium raises the score. So the interesting thing is there, I did not say protein. So that means if I had 50 grams of food, whatever that might be, if I took something out and put protein in, because protein does not raise the score, it doesn't lower it, but the more protein it is there, the lower the score will be as well, because it doesn't add to the score.
Interesting. I find that really fascinating, and just as you're going through this, I can translate in my head to like how it impacts the blood sugar.
Yeah.
So I really do like that.
But we didn't set it. We didn't choose those factors because we think it's going to modulate the blood glucose. The statistical modeling program developed this equation based on this independent input from the dietitians. We did not go in there and say, it has to include this or it must include that. I can tell you there was pressure from some in marketing to say, why can't it include this? We could really sell that. No. It has to be based on the science.
Yeah, which is nice. And the human body, knows what it
does.
Right?
Now, I will say that this, we found in the clinical studies, it does not work for everyone.
Oh, that's interesting.
There were about 15% of people that we didn't make it worse,
Right.
didn't make their blood glucose measurements worse, but it didn't help them either. So, and that sort of falls into the range of nothing that I'm aware of in medicine helps everybody 100% of the time. I have yet to see that. So I wasn't that surprised. I suppose I was disappointed.
Yeah.
You'd like to see it work for everybody in the test, but
Yeah, well, we're not test tubes. We're humans, right? I mean, we all have our own genetic makeup, and
Yeah.
so I find that interesting. There's a lot of complicated science behind this. Can you break it down to make it simple?
yeah, there is a lot of complicated science behind this that helped us generate the equations that then score the food. But the beauty is that allows us to execute and put it in a platform that makes it extraordinarily simple for the individual person to use. I remember a story from one gentleman. He said, "Oh, this was so easy. I would go up to what my wife was cooking for dinner tonight, and I just look at my list of foods that I like, and I'd say, okay, I can have this much of that, and this much of that." And it's just the regular foods that I would always eat, but it was just slightly different proportions. Other people talk about how when they go to a restaurant, never knowing what they should or shouldn't choose within a restaurant, you can just look it up. You're in a restaurant, which restaurant are you in? This one, look at the scores it, I know what to choose. When people go grocery shopping, oh my gosh, because how do you know when you just pick a food up off the shelf whether or not this is going to be a reasonable food for you? Using Thrive365, we just say use your smartphone, aim the camera at the UPC code on the package, and boom, you will see the score of the food on a per serving basis, which is what the nutrition facts panel is, of course. You'll see the score of the food right there. And if it comes up scoring a 15, you'll think, oh, I wouldn't be able to have very much of that. Or if it comes up scoring a 2 or a 1 or a 0, wow, that's really easy to include in my diet. Very easy. So the execution of it, the way people use it day to day, makes it really, really easy.
I like that. You take a complex science and you simplify it so that people can have a healthier eating pattern and improve their blood glucose levels.
It was really rewarding to see that happen. And we had a lot of people working on this. We had consumer insight people working on this. And I raised that because consumer insight are the people that say, well, this is how a consumer behaves. This is what's important to the consumer, to a person out there in the world. You can have all your highfalutin ideas. Let me see how it works when the rubber hits the road. And one of the things she said was, can you do this so that they only have to pay attention to the score within the meal? And that's something I'd never thought of. But that turned out to be a key part of this, so that you just look at the meal. A couple things with that is you don't have to keep track over the course of the day. More importantly, nobody is perfect. Nobody's perfect. If you mess up on a meal, you eat a little too much or not quite enough, because it's just as important to eat enough as it is don't go over. You haven't ruined your day. You're starting afresh at the next meal. And that's, I think, removes a lot of the anxiety that people living with type 2 diabetes have around food. They don't fall into the trap with Thrive365. They avoid that trap of, oh, I've blown it now, I might as well eat whatever I want for the rest of the day. No. Maybe you didn't do so well at that meal. The next meal is a new one.